behind to your side, and of course the front door you came in. And if anybody needs to use the restroom today, you just go down to the hallway to the double doors. The bathrooms are there on the left, and there's water fountain right outside there. But I think if something, some big fires happens, our convening spots in the parking lot across the street. I'm pretty sure. So yes, it is. I'm more than sure. That's all I have though. Yeah.
Okay, reminder that this meeting is being recorded. This is the Oregon Hanford Cleanup Board meeting, August 4th, 2025. We're going to start today with roll call and quorum check. So start at the end of the table down there, Matt Hendrickson, if you could give us name and your affiliation.
I'm Matt Hendrickson. I'm with the Oregon Department of Energy. I'm the radioactive waste remediation specialist for the group.
I'm Sarah Lovetank for the Oregon Department of Energy, and I represent Oregon on the Hanford Natural Resource Trustee Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Cecilia. I also work for the Oregon Department of Energy. I am the Hanford hydrogeologist and the primary HAB member for Oregon.
Stellan Ortiz, Oregon Hanford Cleanup Board.
I'm Sage Long. I'm on the Oregon Hanford Cleanup Board. I'm from Mitchell.
Jeff Huntington, I'm the Senior Policy Advisor to Governor Kushner on natural resource issues. Happy to be here today.
Thanks, Max Woods, Assistant Director at the Oregon Department of Energy for Nuclear Safety and Energy Security.
Jeff Wyatt, Board Chair.
Bart Reese, Staff, Oregon Department of Energy, Board Administrator.
Mia Burke, Oregon Hanford Cleanup Board.
Jim Doherty, Oregon Hanford Cleanup Board.
Steve March, Oregon Hanford Cleanup Board, newly reappointed by the governor. Thank you. And served on it before.
Michael Freeman, Oregon Hanford Cleanup Board.
Okay, and online we have several board members. I'll try to pick you out here from the window. Senator Gorsuch.
Yes, I am here.
Thank you. Steve Bedrick, Stevens.
Steve Bedrick, Board Vice Chair. Wish I could be there with you all in person.
Thank you. And David Boothroyd, another new member of the board.
Yes, I am here. I'm another new member. Glad to be here.
That covers the membership, right? Okay, so we'll take a couple minutes. We have a number of guests in the room, so if we could start over here, if you could just quickly introduce yourself and your affiliation, that would be great. We'll go around the room.
My name is Carol Stefan. I've been volunteering as a planning coordinator for DSO.
Eddie Holbrook, Harvard Ecology Nuclear Waste Program, Deputy Program Manager. I'm Jeff Schramm. I'm with the Environmental Protection Agency.
I am Amy Slusher. I'm a policy advisor to Governor Tina Kotek on energy and climate policy. Caitlin Johnson, communications for the Oregon Department of Energy.
Dan McDonald, in Ecology. I serve as the project manager for the waste treatment plant.
Susan Coleman, with chair of the Hanford Advisory Board.
Satish Laik, program manager, Washington State Department of Ecology. And I'm Giselle Alvarez. I am in the communication section for the Department of Ecology.
And you have Suzanne Dahl.
And also online, we have Suzanne.
Yeah, Suzanne Dahl, Washington State Department of Ecology.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else online that would like to introduce themselves?
Dan Solitz, former board member.
Okay, thank you very much. Reminder again, this meeting is being recorded, and the first order of business today is to approve the January 2025 meeting summary that was distributed by Mark several weeks ago. So if there are no objections or any changes, I would ask for the board to signify approval of the meeting summary by hands. It's kind of awkward in a hybrid meeting. So any objections? Okay, seeing none, the meeting summary is approved. So the agenda today, we're going to start with an update from the Oregon Department of Energy. And then at 3:15 p.m. segue over to the Washington Department of Ecology and US EPA updates. And then board business today, we've got a number of things. We will spend a few minutes welcoming the new members. Mark will let us know what we can expect at the Hanford site tour tomorrow. We have a 324 building comment letter that we would like to review and if possible approve today. We would also like to spend a little bit of time talking about waste management at Hanford. And there's a few other odds and ends that we will pick up in board business if we have time. So if there isn't anything else, we will move on to Matt Hendrickson of the Oregon Department of Energy. Matt?
All right, well, thank you. I want to take 15 to 20 minutes and kind of cover what we've been doing recently. And so much of it has to do with the 200 West update. So a little bit about 200 West, because I get to go. We got to start with what's it about? Well, it's top level, it's part of the holistic negotiations. And that is a very, well, it's not voluminous, but there is a lot of information within these holistic negotiations. And it's all about the framework for how ecology, US DOE, and the US EPA are going to move forward on the Hanford cleanup. And part of the things that we are very concerned about in Oregon is, transportation issues and things that may come through here. Issues that might affect the Columbia River and the overall cleanup at Hanford here. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about specifically the 200 West area. And that's a set of, they will retrieve a set of up to 22 tanks. They're expected to retrieve these 22 tanks from Hanford's 200 West area by 2040. So there are other milestones that are associated with this that include the option of perhaps grouting or making this waste into a more cementous form, making it a solid waste rather than a pre-treated liquid type waste. So this milestone, the M045-135 covers kind of the broad scope of some of the other stuff we'll talk about a little bit later. This is the one that says you're retrieving these 22 tanks. A supplemental analysis of this was provided by the DOE earlier this year. And a lot of our constituency made comments on it. Need to go backwards. Okay. So it analyzes the potential of the supplemental analysis, takes a look at the potential environmental impacts from this project. It relied on several previously done environmental impact statements, EISs. But they only provided that supplemental for this specific project. Some of these old EISs were the system-wide EIS that was done in '97. Some of them were on the Hanford tank missions, and some of them were on the WEIR, or excuse me, not WEIR, the TBI, Test Bed Initiative, which was the small 2,000 gallons that was just been shipped, and I am informed has been grouted and disposed of at both Utah and Texas, where the waste went at this point. It compares the options of shipping this liquid versus grouting it on site and shipping that off. It talks about road and rail transportation. It includes build out of some of the facilities needed for this project. And we are still awaiting a waste incidental to reprocessing. I don't know why it says recovery. Should say reprocessing. Decision that this is indeed a lower level waste and they can do it with this. This is not what's called a high level waste. I haven't heard much about when they'll be coming out outside of we have to wait for Congress to say it's okay to have the various staff at DOE headquarters that they've been approved and can sit in their positions before we see this weird. So 200 West area, what we're talking about is in that left side, you can see S SX and U and SY farm. The SY farm are the current double shell tanks that are in this area. If I'm not mistaken, there are 4 of them. And that's all they have to potentially move this waste into out there. You can see with it being geographically isolated from the waste processing plant, which is, or direct feed low activity waste system, which is directly to the bottom of this page, which would be to the east. You can see there's no real good way to get it to that facility. There's no real way to get over to the treatment facility without re-implement or without getting the cross-site transfer lines in place or building out various load-in, load-out infrastructures to truck the waste. We're not really going to compare those 2 potential options, but you can see it is geographically isolated out there. And this is kind of a layout that I got from one of the industry day presentations that was provided to DOE. This kind of shows what kind of facilities they're going to put out there. Around the SY farm, there will be multiple things put in, and they will need to put in a pad for the ion exchange columns that this AMP system, or Advanced Modular Pretreatment System, AMPS, which is like the TISCR, which is the tank side cesium removal system. Those ion exchange columns will need to go out there. And then they will need facilities, what I say is a LELO, it's a load in, load out, either to truck that material, to load this material, this pre-treated material, if it's liquid, onto trucks to ship or whatever not, or they'll have to put in a facility to do the grouting out there, if that's what they choose to do. We in Oregon have repeatedly expressed certain concerns on aspects of this system. In fact, our own governor wrote this letter in support of some of our comments, where she is very concerned about the transportation of tank waste by rail or road through Oregon. We are also concerned that we want an open process that engages many of the impacted communities along the route, be they tribal communities, rural communities, or larger cities, whatever route is chosen to do. Some of these comments were mirrored not only by our own cleanup board, Oregon Hanford Cleanup Board, which is here today, but is also by the Department of Energy staff here today. Some tribal governments shared their concerns, and many industry and environmental groups also shared concerns with some aspects, maybe not what we were concerned about, but what they might have seen impacting their work. So this was all submitted earlier this year. Many of the things that OHCB and ODO and some of the tribal nations, though I don't speak for them, shared was that it's inherently riskier to transport liquids. I've often said before about the analogy of putting chlorine in your pool. It's a heck of a lot easier to take out that chlorine tablet that's solid than it is to take out the chlorine liquid that you poured in. So if anything happens, that solid form can be controlled easier. It's also self-shielding. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So it protects the public from dose on the route. All of us highlighted the need for broad engagement. We also were concerned about the appropriateness of relying on some of the risk analysis from the older EISs, and would like to have seen something more direct and included a little more route information in this essay, or supplemental analysis, excuse me. And this project is very large. What we had to work with some of the documents that we had was 32 gallons over 10 years. Although you'll often see the term 2.9 million gallons. So that would be 29 million gallons, which was also the lower end of what was in some of this analysis that we had. 2.9 million gallons a year, if that is grouted off-site, will take up almost the entirety of the nationwide grouting infrastructure just to grout those 2.9 million gallons. And we do want a lot more clarity in routes and the classification of the material to be shipped. Is it going to be level A material, which is low level? So class A type of material is the lowest NRC classification of waste. It tends to have the lowest isotopic load, depending on both long and short-lived isotopes that's in it. And that material can go to Clive, Utah, which has one of the private disposal facilities in state. Clive, Utah can only accept Class A. So it behooves the DOE, if they want to send material that's a little closer, it'll take a little less to transport it there, but it would behoove them to get this material so that it's a Class A instead of a Class C or B, which would have to go to Texas. We do assume because the shortest way to get to Clive, Utah is on lines that run through Oregon. So we assume that it's going to go through Oregon. We like to keep in mind the natural shielding that concrete provides, and that mixing radioactive liquid with grouting material dilutes that radioactive content. So not only is it shielded, it has less, at least per unit size, less radioactive material in it. And it reduces that risk of high pH, so alkaline material. This waste is not only a radioactive waste, but it could classify as a RCRA, Resource Conservation Recovery Act, hazardous chemical waste. In this case, for corrosivity of the high pH of all the sodium hydroxide in it. Also, there are other chemical components in it, such as volatiles and semi-volatile organic compounds. How is that material going to be addressed? And will this material, will it have other waste codes on it, such as U codes, which is another classification of waste material under the EPA. Class A is important, and why it's important to get this stuff to Class A. It's the lowest level of waste. It has lower dose rates. The shipping containers are generally more available. So if this is shipping as what's called a low specific activity type waste, that's another classification used under the Department of Transportation. If it ships as that, those containers are more available. They're broadly in use out there right now. And if all of this waste goes to Clive, Utah, that's only 16% of its disposal capacity. So again, if it's sent as a Class A to Utah, there's less constraints on the final disposal path. And again, we still have the assumption that this might, or all of it might go through Oregon. Here's a couple of maps. You can see this one in black on the left side of the screen, runs down to the chutes across some of our, and along some of our tribal communities and some of the fastest growing communities in Oregon. I also highlighted in red because I have not yet found why the federally funded research and development corporate FFRDC analysis of alternatives for this material, why they didn't include that particular rail route, but that is a mainline UP rail route that runs along the I-84 corridor. I'm still researching that and what impacts choosing that route would have on Oregon and the stuff going through Oregon. And it is important because something of this magnitude and this size, it is likely an incident will happen at some point. That incident might just be at a crossing. It might not be a derailment. It might not be a spill, but there is definitely the risk of an incident. Now, what has changed since we got this SA and I did that transportation analysis? That was last year. What we found out in this SA, and I wanted to highlight this for everyone, is the fissile exemption of 15 grams per container. That was assumed to be 2 grams previously in other analysis I saw on this project. That means that 7.5x increase means that almost every tank, in fact, I believe every tank in 200 West would be able to ship a full 5,000 gallon load. You leave 90% ullage, so it's really going to be 4,500 gallons per tank. Or you leave 10% ullage. So each tank will be very standardized, at least from some of the material I saw in the SA. That changes our considerations on whether grout or liquid is better, at least from that standardization perspective. Because now you get to ship a lot more liquid in the same type of container over and over again, rather than having to ship less than 2,000 gallons for this tank, or only 700 gallons for that tank, or up to 10,000 gallons for a different tank. It can all be standardized. That has changed some of our assumptions from earlier, where that variability in shipping container, there is now likely, that's not a consideration anymore.
So Matt, the larger shipping container means fewer shipments.
Potentially,
But in the event of an accident or a spill, the spill would be larger.
It
So
would.
how would you compare those two risks?
that risk analysis, so there'd be less overall incidents potentially, but each one depending on which tank spill. We had previously rely on this. How many tanks do you consider breaching in an accident? Is it one? Will they carry three on a rail car? Will they only carry two? That is very hard at this point to put a firm finger on, especially looking at some of the old EISs that didn't really address that kind of material.
And that type of thing is exactly what you would expect to see in an EIS, which wasn't done.
So could you talk a little bit more about class A versus B versus C and the actual contents of this waste in terms of chemicals, chemical hazards and radionuclides, as in particular, some of the longer lived, more soluble ones like technetium?
Well, the technetium, if they ship liquid, that would be very sensitive because the technetium is highly water soluble. So unless you're shipping it solid, it's going to run. And it would be very hard to control. So again, that's critical for us to highlight is the other hazards of this, like the organic hazards. So the difference between a class A and class C, really, as far as the NRC is concerned, is just a concentration of the radioisotopes in it. And that's all that they care about. Class A, B, C, that's all they care about is that low. The other material, now, if you remember for testbed initiative, they had to get a variance from the EPA to ship that material because there may have been other waste classifications that this treatment of it didn't meet the EPA criteria. So they needed to get a variance for that. I'm also looking forward to in the future how DOE addresses a variance for all these different tanks and their different constituents. Those constituents, like I said, could range from chemical, which would be, again, your volatiles, your solvents, materials, IPA, isopropyl alcohol. It could be other chemical components like nitrates, cyanides. Yeah, it is a complex mixture in each tank.
So would you anticipate a blanket variance or a case by case or tank or shipment by shipment variance?
I would expect, I think that it would be very difficult to ask the EPA to do a case by case variance for this. So I would expect, depending on how this moves forward and what treatment or technologies are chosen or what goes into the SY farm, will determine how the EPA decides either yes, you can do it or not. Because if you can get the solvents out, then you're not as concerned about some of those what are called U codes. They're in some of RCRA, Resource Conservation Recovery Act. You're not as concerned about other D codes, some of the hazardous waste characteristics that might be in RCRA. But you'd still have that corrosive solubility problem. If it stays liquid, you would still have the technetium problem. And it only gets down to class A if they're able to remove the strontium as well as the cesium from any of these tanks. And while the testing showed that TBI was able to do that, that doesn't necessarily mean that that will be true for these tanks. So class C is just a lot more radioactivity in it. It's a slightly different beast from the chemical problem as well. I don't know if that answered your question, Jeff. But no, that would still be a problem if it's liquid. If it's solid, it solves quite a few of those problems, including the corrosivity characteristic nature. Now, I also have here that I crossed the one out. We still think that if it's solid, it's more likely to meet that 1 millirem per hour dose rate that was assumed in the system-wide EIS. If it's solid, it might be able to do that. If it's liquid, your dose rate might be a bit higher. depending on your transportation events, more incidents, which one's safe or not, that's now uncertain. Because the SA also introduced another wrinkle and that it changed the form of the solid material. So you no longer had the assumptions that I was using, like 13.1 cubic yards, if I'm not mistaken, cubic yards or feet. No, it's probably cubic feet. Boy, cubic yard would be a big one. But container of solid material, they changed those assumptions to a different form. And until we get more information in an EIS, we won't know what kind of form that's going to take. So it's very hard to do this planning and understand the risks that our communities might be taking on. Again, we still say the solid form prevents it. Well, it contains pollution spread. We still think that. And we think that any employment activity should come from the local region. It's more sustainable to have it here. Here's some related milestones, next steps. I wanted to highlight some of this presentation as well. These next steps are coming up. Alternative selections. This is something the OHCB should be proud of, something that you worked on to get this decision changed to this year. So they're going to make this M60, 62, 64 milestone this year because of some of the work this board did, plus the other commenters, where they make alternative selections for this 200 West facility. We're still expecting the WEIR to come out. When that WEIR does come out, that will be another opportunity for comment. Next year, at the end of the year, is the critical path schedule, M62, 65. That's kind of associated with some of these industry days that we've seen, not associated, might be in the future associated, but you can see this timeline of what we're looking at on this side. We're expecting an expression of interest that came out earlier this year, or we're hoping, request for proposal next year, and they will review it, and then we'll see if they start. So a lot of stuff was going to happen at the end of this year, towards the end of next year on this project. So again, I'm going to highlight this, and I have a copy with me available if someone wants to take a look at the scope of procurement. I do want to highlight this second bullet in particular, additional LDR, that's land disposal restriction. That was the waiver that DOE had to get from the EPA. LDR stands for land disposal restriction for treatment. They might put in a requirement for the industry looking to go in there to remove the solvents, at least from this waste stream, by some method, yet to be determined. Could be chemical reduction. I don't think it's going to be oxidizer strike. I don't think it might be something like that, but some other way to isolate and remove that solvent before it's made into ground or before it ships as liquid, one way or the other. Solidification. Like I said, I want to highlight that our work and the comments we have put in has made the DOE at least, or helped to show Oregon wants the DOE to really look at solidification on site. We still have questions. If that volatile treatment envisioned in Industry Day will remove the hazards to waterways. Solid form also mitigates that corrosive hazard, which is not true for the liquid. Will the dose rates get closer to the previous EIS's limits? We want to see that TBI data when we can, see what has been established, at least through that limited scope testing that they have done. We want more clarity on shipping routes, classifications, and volumes. All those things are still in flux and were not quite answered by the SA or supplemental analysis. And without an EIS process or environmental impact statement process, how will the DOE engage impacted communities and emergency responders? I highlight here some of the WIP packs from the old WIP roadshows, which is the Waste Isolation Pilot Project Plant. They'll be taking the true or transuranic waste from Hanford later on this decade, here in a few years. And we really enjoyed their roadshows. So that went a little longer than I was hoping, but what kind of questions are out there?
Matt, maybe I'll get started. Thank you. Ton of information, as always, Matt. Great. Can you explain a couple things here that I think the board will find helpful? One is the AMPS, the Advanced Modular Pretreatment System, what that is and why it matters. And a little more about a WEIR, Waste Incidental to Reprocessing, what that is and why it matters. Can you talk about those two things?
So I'll start with the board many of the board here are familiar with Tisker system, right? Do you know what I mean when I say Tisker? Show of hands?
Let me explain that one. Go ahead.
All right, so a few hands. So this system is a pre-treatment type system. It uses a crystalline silicon titanate. It's titanium, not tungstenate. I sometimes say tungsten, it's not that. Titanate, and it's like an ion exchange column. It's kind of how it acts, and it pulls cesium out of this liquid waste. And the cesium is by far the largest contributor to dose rates and the radioactive harm of this material. There is some research out there there are some suggestions that it also pulls strontium out. AMPS versus Tisker, so tank side cesium removal system. AMPS is the advanced modular pretreatment system. Very similar technology. You can almost interchange them. It's the same company, same type of technology, but AMPS is like 2 Tiskers. So instead of saying Tisker squared or something like that, they went with a whole new nice AMPS. It is slightly redesigned. It has larger columns. So each individual ion exchange column can hold, I do believe, holds more cesium. It might improve also the throughput of the system in, gallons per day. Whether they utilize the full gallonage, 10 or so, 10 a minute or 5 a minute, whatever it might be, is yet to be seen. They need somewhere to go. So that pre-treated waste would need to go to a tank that's clean and ready for it, just like they're doing in DF law or direct feed low activity wastes. That's what AMPS is. And that's important because it takes out the bulk of that radioactive content. And if they can take out enough to get this stuff to class A, it becomes a little safer to ship. Your dose rates are low enough that you can ship it, and you meet other criterion that allow it to be more easily shipped.
And Matt, maybe I'll even add, even to step back, if that treatment, the reason that matters, not only for safety, reducing radioactivity levels, but because without that treatment, the tank waste is classified as high-level waste. And high-level waste can only be treated in one way, that's vitrified. Right. Can only be disposed of in one location, that's an off-site deep geologic repository, which does not exist today. So it has to happen to do that treatment.
Does the tank that after it goes through the Tisker system, does that tank exist? That interim storage tank before it gets
Yes,
crowded or?
I think it exists now in SY, SY 10. Ecology might help me with this one. I want to say SY 103, but I think it might be 2 just because I said 3. But it's not 101.
And then,
Anyone?
yeah, I think it's also important to know what.
Oh, wonderful.
Or,
No, I don't. I'm in a Zoom.
Yeah,
what happens to the cesium, the ion exchange residue?
So that material is absorbed into this ion exchange. So the cesium's in there. Those tanks are then stored in the ion exchange column storage pad for future high-level waste vitrification.
Yeah, so those
At least
tanks-
that's the understanding that I have. TBD, but since that cesium itself is still, those ion exchange columns, as best I know, are still high-level waste. That means that they have to be vitrified. So,
Can you explain the weir as well?
well, you did hit upon that a little bit. It's the waste incidental to reprocessing. It is the process that DOE uses to determine whether this qualifies as a high-level waste. Stuff that might have been from reprocessing of spent nuclear fuel rods that used to happen here at Hanford extensively. Or if it was a waste that's, well, incidental to reprocessing, so not directly related to the reprocessing, it might have come on later. So the thought is that this waste was all these different other chemical components, some of the daughter products, things like that, that eventually build up in this kind of waste. That was not, it's very difficult.
So The weir evaluation that we're talking about here
Yeah.
has to fulfill three requirements to become classified as other than high-level waste. You have to remove key radionuclides to the extent practicable, so that's the cesium and strontium. You have to have the waste in a solid form, so that's the grout. And you have to have documentation, a model from the facility where it's being disposed, and it's not going to impact groundwater resources. So once it meets those three criteria, then it can be classified as low-level waste or low-activity waste. Until it passes a weir determination, it is managed as high-level waste.
Let me get this straight. The big things that says impact the community route, broad engagement and classification of material. Those are three things that are up in the air.
Somewhat, yes.
Okay. Thanks to the governor's letter over here, that's one of the main concerns, correct?
It is, the route choosing and how DOE interacts and gets this knowledge out there to these communities is very important to the governor as the state of Oregon. So.
I might speak to that.
Yes, please.
If you're okay. Yeah, I think, thanks for raising that. One of the reasons I came for the tour tomorrow and to make sure that because of this presentation, that there was clarity and that there were questions about the administration's position. You know, I think our NEPA concerns are not to be, set aside for the substantive concerns. I think the reliance on an ODIS is astonishing to us, first of all, and its applicability based on some of the differences you were identifying is really clear to us. And also the larger tank sizes and questions about the availability of information on the alternatives and what we'll know before the decisions are made, or what we'll find out after a decision's made without some sort of NEPA analysis, alternatives analysis is really concerning. Like that's the whole purpose of an alternatives analysis, is for us to have an understanding of where a project's headed before a decision's made instead of after. I think though, setting aside the NEPA concerns, really the administration's position is really distilled into, three big things. And one is your grouting versus liquid, and whether we're going to transport liquid waste through the state of Oregon. That's a non-starter from the Governor Kotek's position. There just doesn't seem to be any substantive reason that we have to transport this volume of liquid waste through any populated area, whether by train or by rail, and regardless of whether there's a NEPA analysis. And I think we tried to make that clear in the letter, but setting aside NEPA concerns, that's a bottom line issue that we want to see addressed, and have great concerns given the change in the administration. We were working, having conversations with EPA, with Washington, with the Department of Energy at the Deputy Secretary's level before the change in administration about concerns on that and a willingness to have conversations about it. The second, and maybe as large in terms of process, is consultation with our tribal governments, given the potential transportation routes and the absolute lack of consultation there was with tribes that were not in proximity to Hanford versus proximity to potential transportation routes further south in the state, Warren Springs, Klamath. That is just a fundamental miss in the process that's happened so far from our perspective. And then the third is really just transparency with the potentially impacted communities and the lack of process and conversation with community leaders, with emergency response, with not tribal, but governmental entities and citizens across the state about what's being proposed before decisions are made with input on potential impacts. So NEPA concerns, yes, but substantive decisions, what's the bottom line? And the speed of the process of that decision making is what we're keeping a close eye on. And frankly, our letter was trying to lay out the groundwork for what potential next steps, depending on where the administration decides to go. Okay, thank you. So we got about 5 or 6 more minutes. So anybody else on the board want to offer perspective on this issue? Sage?
I just have a quick question. Even if these substances were removed, it would still have, we couldn't sit on site, correct? For an amount of time, so they'd have to be transported by some means in the future.
I believe the time limit for it to be on site was 60 days. If I remember, I believe that's part of the holistic
Once it's
negotiation.
turned into ground, I mean, what, 60 days of?
They are allowed to have 60 days of material storage.
Oh,
Before it
once
has,
it's taken out of the tank.
yeah,
Okay.
before it has to go away.
Been in the tank since 1943, whatever it's been.
Yes.
Board members online, Stephen or David or Senator Gorsuch, any comments or questions before we move on?
No, just that I really appreciated that that update, and also was glad to see that the advocacy that we've all been doing about the issue of about the issue has had an impact. So that's really gratifying to see.
And I would just add that I fully support Governor Kotick's concerns. I think the transportation of this material, it's a very sensitive and serious topic, and so we need to be very careful about what we're doing. And the idea of transporting those liquids through Oregon communities is not something that I would like to see.
And I would like to know, I think I misspoke. I don't think it's in holistics. I believe it's in supplemental analysis where they talk about 60 days of on-site storage.
Did you show two alternate routes? One was down 84, and then I think there was another one. You didn't say what that was, but 84 might work because they could stop in Arlington and pick up the radioactive material there.
This left over? Yeah. Well, then I believe it could, not only us, the Oregon Hanford Cleanup Board, but Confederate Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation.
But what was the alternate? There was two that.
Okay, let me see if I
could share.
There are two other routes.
Two different sides.
If it goes to Texas,
Two sides.
the railroad would go up through Spokane.
Right.
And if it goes through Utah, it could either go down 84 or down
Right.
Chutes.
Oh, so there wasn't a fourth? Okay, that's what I was.
Stuck on what's changed.
I think the bottom line is that, Jim, to your point, just the lack of information about what routes are really under consideration.
Yeah, right.
And what it might mean for any of those routes, train routes, truck routes. If it doesn't go through Oregon, the good people of Spokane might care deeply about it, right? Everywhere you go, we just need transparency and information about what those options are.
Sarah, I'm gonna pick on you for 2 minutes. In the event of a spill in a waterway, like say the Deschutes River, what would consequences be from your perspective?
It really depends on the quantity and exactly what was in there in the. You'd have emergency actions right away. The cleanup itself, then you'd have like an entire like remedial action there on that spill site. And it all depends, if you're looking for specific impacts to the river, I don't know, it really depends. Like there are sometimes like, trucks, timber trucks and, rail cars that do sometimes go off track and spill things at rivers all the time. And you have a cleanup action, it becomes its own website. And then you have, hopefully a natural resource damage assessment that's done and, some sort of restoration that comes after that.
But I will say, unlike the recent rail spill or truck spill on the Olympic Peninsula, this material isn't necessarily lighter than water. So you can't just put a boom up to contain it. Once it's in there, it's mixed, and you'll never get it out. You might be able to get contaminated soil in, or sediments, but once it's downriver, it's downriver.
It would be very difficult to control from its chemical profile and radiological.
Okay, so whatever it is, it's in the food chain.
If you eat fish from the shoots, yeah, if it goes down the shoots.
Well, but the strontium and the cesium are being used already, so those are the things that would really enter the food chain. We have a lot of radionuclides that are a danger because radioactivity entering the sediment and if critters live nearby, they are exposed to radioactivity, but they don't, but a lot of radionuclides are not taken up and long.
It'd be a toxic hazard more than a radiological hazard was by.
The nitrates are going.
Yeah.
Nitrates.
Okay, so bottom line, we need an EIS.
That's it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we'll be at that. Okay, next item on the agenda, Washington Department of Ecology and EPA update. Who's giving? You wanna come on up?
Yeah, is there a place we would like?
Oh, yeah, the head of the table.
The head of the table, all right.
You want EPA to join Stephanie now or later?
You're always welcome to come up and join me at the head of the table.
Always take that opportunity.
So I
And
want
it's-
to make sure that Al can see me. If I sit here, can folks hear me online?
And it's always helpful if you guys, a little bit
Yes.
more of an introduction about your job
Yes.
and your role on Hanford would be helpful for the.
I'll let her do her thing first and then I'll back her up after.
All right, perfect. So I did introductions around the table. I am Stephanie Schleif. I'm the Nuclear Waste Program Manager here at Washington State Department of Ecology. So our program here, the majority of what we do is overseeing the Hanford cleanup site under the construct of the tri-party agreement in partnership with the Environmental Protection Agency and the work Department of Energy does as the site owner and operator. At Department of Ecology, the Nuclear Waste Program, this is our office. We're known as the Richland Field Office. Thank you for coming here and holding your meeting here at our facility. We have around 100 folks who support our mission here at the program. We do everything from implementation of Resource Conservation Recovery Act. We're delegated that authority through EPA. We do Clean Air Act for the Hanford site, as well as Clean Water Act regulatory decision-making. We also have some responsibility for being lead for CERCLA cleanup or Compensation Environmental Response Compensation Liability Act, and soil groundwater cleanup decisions under that authority as well in partnership with Environmental Protection Agency. That's a little bit of an overview. We do have a presentation. If you want to pull that up, Ryan, I'll give you a minute. Or Matt.
Sure.
Perfect, thank you, Matt. So if you want to go to the next slide. Here's what we're going to cover today. Talk a little bit about outreach and education. We have a communications team that goes out into the community, supports different events, mostly on Hanford site education and the cleanup. Ryan will cover that slide, talk about the outreach and education efforts we've supported so far and things that we have on the radar. Talk about tri-party agreement negotiations that are ongoing, low activity waste commissioning, our public involvement opportunities that we have out right now or that are upcoming. And then I'll end on an update for the Hanford site-wide dangerous waste permit. Outreach and education, Ryan, I'll hand it to you.
Sure. So, I introduce myself earlier. I'm Ryan Miller. I'm the communications manager for the Nuclear Waste Program. We've got a team of me and 4 super fantastic staff that does all kinds of public involvement, outreach, education work. And just want to highlight some of the recent things that we've been up to. We, attended some events like the Columbia Basin Wellness Fair, the Return to the River Salmon Festival here in Tri-Cities. Stephanie talked to leadership Tri-Cities. We talked about, groundwater and did a Hanford environmental presentation to students at Chiawana High School, attended Walla Walla Pride Festival. And one of the events I've been most excited about was back at the beginning of July, Sarah and Ben on our team hosted a mock Hanford workshop with Boys and Girls Club members here in Tri-Cities, where we had, I think, about a dozen or so students come down to WC Tri-Cities, and we had some of our staff out, and we kind of put them in the cleanup kind of decision maker shoes and did some scenarios involving like the reactors and tanks, and basically put them in charge of cleanup and kind of did some mock scenarios about cleanup and compared them to what's been done so far, which is super cool activity for the students. And then we also recently attended the B5 Learning Center, which we talked about some Hanford habitat wildlife. We didn't, actively, I'd say participate in the event, but we were invited to attend a Hanford journey with Yakima Nation and Columbia River Keeper last week, which was, I really appreciated the invitation and being able to partake in that event. And we had the Umatilla County Fair on our radar down in Oregon for this weekend, but we might run into some issues with a booth. So if we can't do it this year, we're definitely going to be doing it the next go around. But if anybody is, sorry,
We'll see you then.
we hope so. We hope so.
I think
We're hoping to split a booth, but there's been some logistical challenges. But if anybody is interested in having us come and talk to, a classroom or organization or community, we can do virtual events. And we're still currently navigating a travel freeze, but, depending on the situation, we might be able to do an exemption. But so we love to come out and do, chats about our work in Hanford and some information on the slide there if you're interested, or you can come talk to me during the break and I can give you my card. Stephanie, back to you.
Go to the next slide. So holistic agreement next steps, and this dovetails off of what you heard Matt talk about earlier to some extent. So back in January, Ecology, Department of Energy, and the Environmental Protection Agency signed the changes that went out for public comment to the tri-party agreement and the consent decree between the state of Washington and Washington State Department of Energy. Since then, we've been working on implementation of that agreement. One of the deliverables under that was what Matt spoke about, the supplement analysis that was out for the 60-day public comment period on the draft supplement analysis for Hanford's West Area Tank Waste Treatment Mission. Ecology also commented on that document while it was out for public comment. I'll highlight a couple of things that we said in our letter. So we do believe that draft essay provides adequate information and impact analyses for activities associated with the proposed retrieval and treatment of the 200 West Area single shell tanks. We also accepted that draft essay as fulfilling the obligation under the tri-party agreement milestone M6264 that the Department of Energy had to satisfy their statutory and regulatory obligations under the National Environmental Policy Act. We did also have a comment in our letter, again, to the point, Max, that you were making around transparency and the need for Department of Energy to develop a transportation plan that includes public meetings and tribal engagement along potential routes that Department of Energy evaluated under that supplement analysis. As part of that transportation plan, we did encourage the Department of Energy to use the public involvement plan that's part of the tri-party agreement as part of developing that document. Also want to highlight one of the other documents we ourselves are also looking out for, and that is the 200 West Area Risk Mitigation with Waste Incidental to Reprocessing document that needs to be posted to the Federal Register and out for public comment. I was talking to my team to identify about how long we anticipate that public comment being. That's really a question for Department of Energy since it's their public comment period, but it looks like we anticipate it being at least 90 days. And hopefully posted for public comment by the end of this calendar year, but that continues to be one of the deliverables. We continuously ask Energy what the status is for getting it posted and out for public comment. And then lastly, one of the other things that we committed to do under the settlement agreement that we signed with the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection Agency as part of the holistic agreement is to try to come to an agreement with EPA and the Department of Energy on changes to the tri-party agreement appendices H and I that cover single shell tank retrieval and closure. We've been in confidential mediation agreement space on that negotiation to try and see if we can come to some sort of understanding. We did recently hold tribal listening sessions with the Confederate Tribes of the Umatilla, the Nez Perce, and the Yakimas to get any feedback that they have for us to consider while we're in that negotiation. I think you can go to the next slide. So another negotiation that's ongoing, and you might hear Jeff actually speak to this one as well, is for milestones M15, M16, and 85. Those are milestones under the tri-party agreement. Appendix D of the action plan that speak to, and this slide sort of defines what each of those milestones covers in the space of the Hanford site-wide cleanup. We did sign an agreement in principle with the Environmental Protection Agency and Department of Energy in December of last year to negotiate these milestones. That also put milestones due while we're in negotiation in abeyance until we can reach an agreement and get those milestones out for public comment. One other thing I'll mention is we do anticipate a major milestone being changed as part of that agreement, which we consider to be significant, meaning those milestones, after we come to a tentative agreement and have new draft milestones, will have to go out for public comment. That agreement in principle said we anticipate reaching a tentative agreement by mid-November of this year. So that's the schedule that we're working to. One thing I also want to acknowledge on this slide is I think everyone hears very loudly the progress that is happening on the tank waste mission and the low activity waste facility getting up and running this year and getting that first canister of tank waste vitrified. It's a very exciting time. There's a lot of really great progress happening, but it can't be at the sake of the other key cleanup work that is happening at the Hanford site. Soil, contaminated soil that needs to be remediated, groundwater that needs to be treated, groundwater monitoring wells that we have out there, facilities that are contaminated that need to be demolished. There's a lot of other work scope that is key to the Hanford site-wide cleanup. And one of the reasons why you hear me often talk about how important the Hanford site-wide budget is and why a compliant budget is needed is to keep facilities like the low activity waste facility operational, because the cost of that is very high. But also Department of Energy has obligations for the remainder of the Hanford site-wide work and soil facility and groundwater cleanup. So we continue to have key conversations with our congressional delegation around money that is needed, where it's going to go, and the amount that's needed at Hanford for them to meet their commitments under the tri-party agreement. You want to go to the next slide? So this is an update on where we're at for the low activity waste commissioning process. I think everyone probably saw the announcement that was released Monday of last week as it relates to the hot commissioning consent decree date for the low activity waste facility. So there is a consent decree between the state of Washington and the Department of Energy. That's a court-ordered consent decree. I believe it was early last week, we provided a joint filing to Benton County Superior Court to request an extension to the August 1st consent decree date for the hot commissioning process for the low activity waste facility. That was approved and the new due date has been extended to October 15th of this year. That extension is needed to allow the Department of Energy to complete testing of equipment and facilities, to develop data that's needed for the regulatory agencies for us to do our job and our responsibility to issue permits that we have that need to be issued for the low activity waste facility and our dangerous waste permit. And then also Washington State Department of Health has licenses that they need to issue for the facility to get up and operating. So that extension is to allow all of those processes to happen and for our permits to be issued to ensure that that facility is operating in a way that protects both human health and the environment. I'm going to go to the next slide. Public involvement opportunities. So we have a couple that are out right now for comment. The first is a permit modification to our Hanford site-wide dangerous waste permit to incorporate closure of the outside storage area A facility. That facility is part of the central waste complex in the 200 West area of the site. The facility has a history of storing waste and Department of Energy is going to proceed with closure of that unit. We also have our Hanford site air operating permit renewal that is out for public comment right now. We are the lead agency for that as we implement the Clean Air Act. We also have an interagency agreement with Washington State Department of Health and Benton Clean Air Agency, who also have some responsibilities under that permit that's up for public comment. And then lastly, we have an upcoming public comment opportunity, and that is for the high-level waste facility. Another item that was signed as part of the Hanford Holistic Agreement was to use the same direct feed approach for the high-level waste facility as what Energy is doing for the direct feed low activity waste facility. And this permit modification will be out for 45 days to allow permit changes to reconfigure that facility under the Holistic Agreement to the direct feed configuration. Next slide. And this is our last slide, and then I'm gonna turn it over to Jeff. So we wanted to provide you a status of where we're at for our Hanford site-wide dangerous waste permit renewal. We continue to inch closer to getting that permit renewal out for public comment, and I'm very excited to say you finally saw the number move. We're at 37 now, treatment, storage, and disposal units that are ready and complete for going out for public comment. We expect that even within the next month to be even higher as we're looking to schedule that 120-day public comment period. I think I'll probably just end there and turn it to Jeff to give his presentation, or if you want to after.
Yes, before you do, there may be a couple questions.
Sure.
I have one, on your bullet that says, ecology believes that draft essay fulfills the obligations, so on underneath, so I think what you heard in the discussion here is that many of us in the state of Oregon disagree with that. And my question maybe for both of you, because the Washington Department of Ecology is responsible for implementing certain parts of RCRA and CERCLA, but your mandate, does it stop at the border? In other words, when you are implementing CERCLA and RCRA regulations, are you taking into account the interests of Oregon, tribes in Oregon and so on, or are you more provincial in terms of your mandate? That's a question, because the principal issues that we have in the supplemental analysis were not going to be impacting the state of Washington. They were going to be impacting Oregon and other communities outside the state. So from a regulatory standpoint, what's your mandate?
Well, I will say this. Geographically, from a CERCLA standpoint, we're bound to the Superfund site. But to give you an example of where that extends outside of it is, and I'll talk a little bit about what one of my colleagues has been doing for the last couple of weeks, and that is going out with DOE and providing consultation to the Nez Perce and tomorrow with the Yakima regarding the 324 building. So our outreach and our obligation for communication and transparency goes well beyond the geographical boundaries of the Hanford site. And certainly as it relates to the river itself and releases to the river itself, that is a major concern for Oregon as well. That is a huge responsibility of ours as well. So if I understand your question, what is EPA's responsibility from a regulatory standpoint? Geographically, it's the bounds of the Superfund site itself, but we do have obligations for communication, transparent communication, and engagement outside of the site. Did I understand your question?
Yes, so if we could be more specific about transportation, there are multiple agencies, both federal and state, that have overlapping responsibilities for transportation by rail and truck. But the decision in this case is being made by DOE and ecology, is that correct? Without consultation with these other agencies?
And Jeff, can I just ask a clarifying question? The decision on where DOE is going to grout?
And the transportation routes and exactly what is going to be on those rail cars when it's moved out of state?
Yeah, that's not an ecology decision. That's an energy decision under their federal mandate. For us, when we commented, and this is why I have Suzanne Dahl in our room, who is somewhat of an expert. She's online, and then I have Dan McDonald and Nauko Schiffer, who all helped do the analysis that we put together for the essay, the supplement analysis that went out for public comment. But I think key things that we considered are, does it regulatorily meet NEPA? And is it going to be sufficient enough analysis for us to be able to adopt under the Washington State Environmental Protection Act, otherwise known as SEPA? And will that be enough to support decisions that we have to issue under our regulatory authority? Like under RCRA, when we have to issue a permit for a facility, like if DOE builds a grout facility on site, we would have to issue a permit that would likely have to have a State Environmental Policy Act analysis. Usually our State Environmental Policy Act analysis adopts some of Department of Energy's analysis under NEPA. So we would have to make sure that that regulatory authority, we have enough information in order to put that out. And that SEPA documentation would go out with whatever Resource Conservation Recovery Act decision we issue. Suzanne, is there anything that you want to add to my response there?
Well, and then I guess I would also add that that previous analysis that have been done on transporting waste, whether it's from Savannah River or Rocky Flats to different disposal locations, including also the TBI waste that went from Hanford, and another analysis that was done for some secondary waste associated with the waste treatment plant. Those previous analysis followed the same process as this essay, and their process is they have this programmatic EIS from 1997. That EIS sets out a series of processes that they analyze. They being DOE, then does supplemental analysis or environmental analysis, EAs, and they add in the specific details of the new waste that's going to be shipped, and they use the processes that they laid out for themselves in the programmatic EIS. And so the programmatic EIS laid out the processes for how to do this transportation analysis. And so from our perspective, they're following their processes that they've been doing elsewhere, and most recently associated with some other disposal decisions and transportation decisions at Hanford.
And then, but you did also ask a question on other regulatory authorities that have oversight of transportation. Did you want us to try and address that, Jeff?
No, I think
Okay.
we probably don't have enough time here today to do that, but it's a sensitive and I think ongoing concern or subject. So Jeff, back to you.
Mark, how much time do I have? I don't have an agenda in front of me, or Jeff.
You go for it.
Until 3:45.
Oh, yeah. So, my name is Jeff Schramm, and I am a remedial project manager for the Environmental Protection Agency here on the Hanford site. And I think it's important to kind of delineate, and thankfully Stephanie covered so many bases that it'll make my job very easy right now. To give you an understanding of what my role and my team's role is, we've talked a lot about tank waste and the tank waste mission and vitrification, all of that. The state has delegated authority to over RCRA on our site here. And so a lot of that work is done through the Department of Ecology. We do have an EPA individual. Her name is Michelle Mullen, and she works with the state, but really it's one person that assists as needed with the state in their site. What I represent is the rest of the Hanford site. The Superfund, the CERCLA side of the Hanford site, the cleanup side of the Hanford site. To give you an idea of my team, we recently, an individual that's been in our office for 34 years, Dave Enan, just retired. Prior to him leaving, we affectionately called ourselves SEAL Team 6 because there were six of us is all to oversee the Department of Energy on many of the CERCLA operable units. The Department of Ecology has several operable units that we work with them on, but they are the lead agency on. Dave Enan has retired, has earned his retirement after decades. And so that leaves one supervisor, Laura Bulow, and 4 of us remedial project managers to oversee the site. So it is, you will never hear me, complain or, bemoan the work that we do, but I think the numbers will show you that the work that we have in cleaning up the Hanford site and the number of folks that we have in our office to do it is, there's a reason we call ourselves a SEAL team. We really try to do a lot. So that gives kind of a delineation between the RCRA side and the CERCLA side. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as I talk about some of the things that we're working on right now. I will, so I don't forget, dovetail on what Stephanie said about M18, 16, and 35. 1685. These are what we've kind of, within our working group called the Comprehensive Cleanup Negotiations. These are working on a number of milestones that have been in abeyance and changing, as Stephanie said, one of our major milestones. I have not been in that group. Dave was actually in that group, along with Annie McCartney. She's in ecology and DOE. As Stephanie said, those negotiations are slated to end November, as I understand it, and we'll be going out for public comment regarding. I believe it's the N16. I don't know what the major milestone is. Again, not in that meeting, so I have to be very careful not to speak outside of my lane. But that has been going on, and we've been partnering with ecology and DOE of the tri-parties to work through those milestones and move forward with those. It is important for me to say that, the amount of money that we get every year is enormous, to the tune of $3 billion every year. If you're looking on the outside and looking in, you'd think, oh my gosh, that's a crazy amount of money. Why isn't more happening? The reality is, and one of ecology's folks who still works for ecology, but is out of Spokane now, would ring this bell a lot. It's nowhere near enough money for us to do the things that we need to do to clean up the site in a way that is, I stumble over the word efficient, but that's the word I'll use. So we do the best we can. But it is a lot of money. And there should never be, as Stephanie said, an either or as it relates to the tank waste mission and the cleanup mission on site. But oftentimes at our office, we do feel that. We do feel that, it's a lot of energy, no pun intended, a lot of energy is focused on, getting this tank waste vitrified, which is a very, very important mission. There's still a lot of other stuff that needs to be done. And I'll dovetail that and talk about a couple of things that we're working on in our office. We have 2 operable units along the river corridor. And these operable units house 2 separate reactors. We have the K reactor and we have the N reactor. These are 2 operable units along the river corridor when we're looking at the different reactor operable units. They are the last 2 that do not have a final decision made on the remedy moving forward for how to get those cleaned up. That's important because we've been working toward getting those together and moving forward with the final remedy for the entire river corridor for quite a while. And these last 2 are really important. There's been some things that have happened lately that have been difficult. And one of the things that we're working through with our partners at Ecology and DOE is looking at hexavalent chromium. There's been some changes to the cleanup level, or what will ultimately be a cleanup level for hexavalent chromium that has been a challenge for us. And I won't get into a lot of those details now for 2 reasons. One, there's a lot that we still don't know yet on how we're going to move forward with that, what that's going to mean. So I don't want to get in front of that, but what I will say is that as we move forward and figure out what that's going to look like, you can expect a level of transparency. And frankly, if we're doing our job correctly, you'll be seeing proposed plans and rods for both of those operable units. I will say this, that before these changes came, and I hesitate to talk too much about it because I don't want to get into too much detail right now as far as what changed and why, which is something that we can do at a later time. We were coming close to proposed plans. In fact, both N and K did have in the administrative record proposed plans that were issued. Those have been pulled back because we have to go back to the drawing table as it relates to that. So those 2 operable units are important. Those rods are important to shore up the river corridor with final remedial actions. So we're working on that right now. There's been a lot of effort put into that. The other thing that there's been a lot of effort on lately, some of you were at a meeting recently regarding 324 and the proposed plan for the 324 building. That's been something that has been front and center lately. The 324 building and how we're moving forward with it to a remedy towards that is, again, one of my colleagues, Anna McCartney, that's been her project. So I won't speak in too much detail regarding that, but I will say this because she told me as we were leaving that evidently there were comments that the board had made regarding 324 that we just received today.
That was, I believe, from Odo.
Oh, okay. Sorry for the
You just gave us a brilliant segue into your next item on the agenda. Board business, we're going to be talking about the 324.
Right.
In this board's call. So I gotta cut you off.
Okay,
Sorry.
let me just say one thing and then I will stop, but Annie is tomorrow morning. She is consulting with the Yakima Nation regarding the 324 building. And I think it's important to mention that we're talking about consultations as it relates to other issues. It's an important part of what EPA does. And so I just wanted to highlight that that's why she's not here today to talk a little bit more. So now I'll shut up.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yes.
Stephanie, thank you very much for hosting us today. This is a wonderful facility and we really do appreciate it.
We're always happy to host whenever you want to come out and visit us.
And if we're giving you a hard time, it's only because Neely is.
Hey,
Yeah, thanks, Jim.
we have to be able to have a conversation even when there's not agreement. That's part of my responsibility is being transparent about the decisions that we put out. And so I'm always happy to come have a conversation and discussion even when we're not in agreement.
Great. You had.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I know the appendix H and I, the TPA are in secret negotiations, confidential. Oregon would still like the opportunity to provide some input on some of that, so maybe we could have a staff conversation or something along those lines. Similarly, the comprehensive cleanup negotiations, those are not confidential.
They are not.
Okay, so any feed out of information from those negotiations would be appreciated as well for the decisions.
I'll also just say we do have an MOU with the state of Oregon and we will make sure that we follow that MOU and our obligation to be meeting with you routinely on what the conversations are that we're having for that.
Okay, great. We're moving on now to the board business. I know Mike Freeman is chomping at the bit to talk about the 324 building. But before we do, Mark asked me to remind everybody to complete your workday training. Do you have anything else to add on that part?
So you can make sure you keep your passwords up, check Workday periodically. They do push things out to everyone to accomplish. I don't get a list until people aren't in compliance, so please log in, make sure you don't have any tasks waiting for you.
And I would also note that since the last meeting, there have been kind of three fairly significant things, I would say, or probably more than that, involving the board. The first was the comments working with the governor's office in Odo on a supplemental analysis. Max and I met with Maxine Dexter's, Congresswoman Maxine Dexter's staff, and they have a staffer that is going to be joining us at some point periodically. Is very, very interested in coming up to speed on the Hanford project. And then finally, we have, just to remind everyone, the bylaws were approved at the last meeting or online, I'm not sure which. So it's probably a good idea to at least periodically review those. So Mike, the next item on the agenda is this board's comments on, oh, thank you. Welcome to the new and returning board members. So wanted to give each of you guys 30 seconds or a minute to say something. Start with Steve March.
Well, it's good to be back. I'm
glad that the direct feed, low level waste thing is operational now. Wasn't when I was here before, so that's, I think it's been almost 5 years and now it's finally online. So that's real plus. And you were chair of the board for 4 years or something? I think something like that. I served while I was a legislator and then came back as a citizen, although I was working at Multnomah County at the time. And it's, an important thing to Oregon. And, I'm glad that the governor's office is staying on top of this thing. My family goes back, we had at one time property in the area, back in the, late 1800s. So, that's kind of gave me a little interest in it. So when I was in the legislature, I asked for that appointment. And it's an evolving thing. And I think these steps that we're doing now, it's still obviously still an evolution. Right. And nothing's finalized. Okay. Welcome back, Sage. You want to tell us a little bit about your job and what role you think you'll play on the board?
What role? Listening, a lot of listening. So I'm Sage Long. I'm the Umatilla County Emergency Manager. I'm one of one. There's one of me. So anytime in here I get a phone call or something, that's probably me dealing with the issue. I'm really here to not only learn, do exercises broadly in Ingestion County within the state of Oregon, unrelating to the transportation of these materials or stuff going on. But I think a big perspective that I see even just in this meeting is the understanding that where our response teams are, how we would respond to something like this. And though I know there is a ton of concerns from the board and I'm still learning, if this material is going to be transported through Oregon, how do we mitigate it to the best of our abilities? And I think that's the biggest key issue that I see right here at my forefront. And also as I learn and get better, hopefully gaining some experience from all of you guys, because I just had about 100 acronyms I had to write down. That's about it. And thank you again for trusting me to be on this board and for the approval process that went through with that. I just hope to bring some kind of, even if it's a little tidbit, something to this board. So that's
great. Thanks. And online, David Boothroyd.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hey, I'm Dave Boothroyd. I recently moved to the Tigard area. I was November of 23. And I spent most of my career actually supporting Hanford. When I started working at Hanford, it was a production site. So what we see now is completely different than it was in the 80s. And I'm just happy to be part of this group and just trying to help out wherever I can.
Okay, and we hope to see you in the next meeting, David.
I will be there. Thank you. I'll be there.
And okay, now, Mike, you're up.
Some slides?
Yes. So the board got a copy of a letter that I put together with help from several individuals in this room. Building 324 sits next to the Columbia, and so Oregon has a vested interest in how it's cleaned up. I'm a chemist by training. Something about this issue caught my eye, and in discussion this morning, I realized that there's something that I don't understand, perhaps EPA does, but in the descriptions of the site, a large hot cell, a cement cell with walls 5 feet thick, built to allow workers to manipulate radioactive material using Waldos or remote manipulators while looking through 3 feet of leaded glass. At some point, underwent a spill of highly acidic, highly radioactive nitrate acid, basically, that ate through the bottom of the cell and leaked through the water, supposedly watertight junction between the floor plate and these 5-foot thick walls. The unusual aspect of this is that as this spill of cesium and strontium nitrate filtered through the underlying soil, according to the report issued in 2013, the strontium portion of that material penetrated much deeper than the cesium part of that material. Normally, you would expect strontium to be absorbed preferentially, and that it would have been the cesium that passed to the bottom. Suggests to me that what has happened is rather than absorption, you've gotten actual crystallization, that as the mineral grains grabbed out the water, first the cesium salts crystallized out and then the strontium salt crystallized out. And so they're really not stuck on mineral particles at all. I'm not an expert, but I am knowledgeable in this area. I raise this because today we're asked to make a decision amongst 3 options. The next slide, please. I sent a letter based on what I knew at the time. Tom drafted a comment based on what he knew at the time. We now put before the board 3 choices. First, do we endorse the coupled approach, which was originally proposed to clean up this area? Just to refresh your memory, in that approach, they're going to use those 5-foot thick walls of that hot cell to protect operators to use really long remotely operated arms to dig up this radioactive spill and then store it in another hot cell or storage area inside the building. Dig all that stuff up, then deal with that radioactive mess, and then knock down the building. The decoupled approach would be to remove the building, leaving the spill in place, pull a hot cell, construct a shelter over it so that you can now bring in your equipment. Yes, you'll have to build some extra walls to allow you to then excavate that exposed material underneath this new covering, decoupling the removal from the removal of the building. And finally, as Tom suggests, well, wait a minute, maybe we need some more information before we can decide between those 2. I'm putting you on the spot here. You've had a chance to read what I wrote. You had a chance to read what Tom wrote, and I've now confused you with that slide that I just presented. Do we as a group feel that we should support the coupled, the decoupled, or should we ask for more work to be done so that we really understand what the problem is? I know Mia has an opinion. Would you care to share?
So I really struggle with this comment period because there's not a lot of information given. In terms of, so the coupled approach, they're using these diggers to start digging contamination out of the B cell floor but the diggers can only reach so deep. So they dig some of the contamination out, they then demolish the building, they set up this big tent, and they continue digging until all of the contamination is out. That's kind of new from what their original plan was, which was just using the building and digging. That feels to me, in terms of, from a worker's perspective, it's like a known, it's a known approach. The workers have trained for this in a mock-up facility. They, from what I've heard from the workers, they feel more comfortable doing this approach, which they know, and having the building continue to shield this waste, which is lethal, it's lethal levels of radiation. It's a prompt fatal dose. So it's not your, not your typical waste site, in terms of the danger to exposure to workers. And so from what I've heard is the decoupled approach of removing the building, which is providing shielding from this lethal radiation, and putting up a tent. That seems more sketchy to workers. And there's not a lot of information that has been shared about how much of the building they're demolishing, how much they're exposing, before they put up this tent. Will they put up the tent, before they take down B cell and this concrete slab? If that's actually providing the shielding, or will that be removed? You know, it's just, there's a lot of outstanding questions, which makes it difficult for me to choose one approach or the other. Because it's like, give me more information first and then I can make a better, more informed decision. So that's kind of where I was coming from.
Tom?
So if I could add a little bit of context, if we think about that cartoon that was up with the cesium and strontium in nice columns, that's the condition that the original record of decision saw. And that's where we had these remote arms that were going to dig up the hottest of those columns. And then you would be able to safely demolish the building and get the rest of what's left. What happened in 21 was they found an additional area of almost pure cesium contamination. Pretty far away, still under the building, under the same B cell area, but far enough away that those remote arms can't reach it again. So that's the changed condition. My concern with this project as described now is there are other change conditions out there that we haven't found yet. So once you dig into it, unless you're characterized, you're gonna find something you weren't expecting. Complicating this, underneath B cell, there's also VW sized boulders. You can't get those with a little John Deere arm, which is what these things are. They're John Deere mini excavator arms on poles that are remote operated. So that's the other concern is the geology of the area has big boulders mixed in with sands and gravels. And you're gonna need to add some water to this, and is that gonna redissolve the salts and migrate? There's just a lot of uncertainty, a lot of unknowns. And I'm a measure twice, count once type of guy. That's not the way this proposed plan is written. So that gives me some pause.
It's just, jump in, because my other role as another board member with the Hanford Challenge, I know that's a big, when it comes to training, as you mentioned, it's a big concern, especially there's been cases about whistleblowing, because of the lack of proper training or help, like we said, there's a culture making. To me, that, like I think Max mentioned, there's just a lot of unknowns. But the big thing I think that Hanford Challenge stands for too is worker safety, right? So what would you have to say when it comes to worker safety? And the big thing right now that's happening when it comes to, I think, the latest needs, where are you gonna, I mean, lately I've heard from, I think everything that's happening that they need workers from the Oregon area to come. When it comes to worker safety, what you talking about?
I will say that they have provided an immense body of documentation. And yet, having dug through it all, I still have to agree with Tom and Mia that, boy, there's just a lot there that isn't clear and isn't answered. As Mia pointed out, so once you lift it out, it's going to be very radioactive. So our comments, this board's comments, we could endorse the coupled or the decoupled alternatives, or alternatively, we can just identify the issues that we're concerned with and leave it at that. Having pushed this from the beginning, I now switch my vote to option 3. I very much would like to know more about it. And I would want the people working on it to have certainty.
Stephen Bedrick made a comment that, yes, once we found one additional mystery plume, there's no reason not to expect more.
Indeed. I guess then your proposal then. Yeah. I think most of the, what I would call caveats or questions are identified in your draft, with the maybe possible exception of worker protection. Is that in there? That question wasn't raised directly in my draft. Okay. Mia and I can hammer that together. So your proposal then would be to put these concerns and that's our comment, whether. Yeah. And so may I propose that Mia and I combine our notes and text into a revised letter and circulate that to the board.
One thing to note, that might require action from the chair to suspend certain clauses in the bylaws which require 2 weeks notice to the board. The board could vote on that now. Yeah. Right? We've got a quorum. So.
You need to kind of come up with a timeline on what you want to do.
We would accomplish this within a week. So we nominally operate under Robert's supporter. So Mike, would you like to make a motion? I would move that the board endorse the construction and sending of a note following the third option, asking for more information with specifics to come from my note and Mia's concerns. Timing to be completed 1 week from today.
Second.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Remind me the deadline for submittal to DOT?
2 weeks from today.
Okay. August 8th.
Okay. Yeah, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Motion passed. Thank you.
So then there will be 1 week for the board to consider the draft prior to submittal on August 14th.
Yes. Thank you for that clarification. Okay, the next item on the agenda was a white paper was circulated a couple weeks ago. And this is really for discussion and future work by the board. So I'm going to walk through a couple of the high points of this. So most of you have probably seen one or more of these GAO, General Accounting Office reports on Hanford and the Environmental Management Division of the Department of Energy, and they keep hammering DOE on the lack of strategic planning, basically. And in the most recent report, it was quite specific that they don't have a plan, an integrated plan on how to manage their waste streams how they're going to classify waste streams, the volume of these waste streams, and where they're going to go, how they're going to get managed and where they're going to go. So that's, something that is out there that hopefully the US Congress is certainly considering. Another major event that has happened in the last 2 or 3 months is a Supreme Court decision called the 7-county ruling. And I don't think the regulatory agencies or really anyone else at this point has figured out how that is going to influence policy in this area. But basically, it limited the scope of NEPA procedures. So in the past, and somebody can chime in and correct me if I'm wrong, a project could be stalled or challenged based on secondary or tertiary impact. And in the case of Hanford and NEPA analysis, on a waste, well, say routing or something, may or may not have to include transportation impacts out of state if the NEPA analysis was very narrowly defined procedurally. It's quite complicated, but there's a major change in that area that looks like it's going to give agencies like DOE an easier time to negotiate pathways through whatever it is they're doing. So those are really, and then we of course have a new administration and new policies are going to trickle down and impact some of the waste management decisions at Hanford. The other thing is that the state of Oregon has weighed in on some thoughts about how this waste should be treated and managed. So taken together, the opportunity, I think, is for Oregon to try to get out ahead of the waste management issues at Hanford and try to point EPA, DOE, and ecology in a direction that we would prefer. A couple of examples of that, of course, is the waste disposition and transport, but also consultation with impacted communities. So I would turn it over for discussion at this point. I think there's an opportunity here to try to get out in front of some of these new, the new environment that we're operating in 2025.
Jeff, if I may, I have a couple thoughts on all this. To the first point about the GAO report, if everybody doesn't have a copy, by the way, we'll make sure the board has a copy of that report. It was nationwide. It wasn't just the Hanford specific. So keep in mind that Hanford exists in an ecosystem of about a dozen sites across the nation or so that are under the DOE Environmental Management or DOE EM complex. Hanford's the biggest by both size and by money and by perhaps complexity, but it is one of the sites. I would like to give credit to Matt Henderson of our team, who I believe scooped the GAO when he particularly wrote our comment letter and had the foresight to say and make the analysis about how the volume of waste from Hanford will consume the available infrastructure to both process the waste, as well as potentially the available capacity for disposal at the Utah and Texas facilities. That was Matt's original thought. GAO then, after that, came up with that basically the same idea, which was in short, there isn't a plan to look at, and the Utah and Texas facilities are commercially operated, but they're of national significance because they take waste from not only the DOE complex, but also from industry, right? There's only so many radioactive waste disposal facilities in the nation. Those are two important facilities. So Matt had the foresight to kind of raise that awareness to GAO. They came up with a report that more or less does the same thing with more detail that DOE needs to be strategic about it all. I was thinking that at our next meeting, we could invite the GAO to come and present on that report, and I think they would probably come. They have a Washington state-based team and that does a lot of work around here, Hanford, but other issues in the Northwest. Here's the caveat on the GAO, though. And Ryan, I might look to you as the only person from Washington State Ecology that's still here. That's Eddie's here. Hi. Washington's, and I want to put the word in your mouth, but I understand that Washington State typically declines to communicate with the GAO based on past misinterpretation of your comments, but also Washington State law and other issues that the GAO has not, your position, Washington State position, not correctly characterized in some of their reports in the past. I don't know exactly if I'm getting this right. The point I want to make is the GAO has a perspective. The GAO does not necessarily always provide clarity and sort of represent this Washington State's position.
I'll say, yeah, we've had concerns in the past and we've written, correspondence with them, but I'd probably have to kick it to Eddie to expand beyond my perspective.
I don't know about that, Eddie, but I just want, the point I really wanted to make was they are not the arbiters of all things, DOE based policy or certainly technical. I'll take the GAO.
Yeah, and I'll say we have, engaged with GAO, even geological letters that we had talked about, as Brian had mentioned, so we continue to engage with GAO very cautiously. Come up with sort of studies.
Nevertheless, I think it's a good idea to have a conversation, right? To address it. The second topic about the 7 counties decision, nobody knows exactly what that means for DOE, for the DOE complex. It's potentially consequential for NEPA review. I don't know what it means, and I think only time will tell as perhaps cases go forward through courts and that new legal founding of NEPA is implemented through federal action for challenges. See what
And we could ask GAO that
actually, we could ask GAO that question. We might need a lawyer. There might need some attorneys general or somebody else to help us about it, but we'll see. Somebody's from Congress. What was the third? The last name. So, what's your third point? The GAO report, we've got 7 counties. The,
Oregon's.
well. Transportation, yeah, it's always sort of transportation.
And then where does it go?
Where does it go?
Yeah, how much is it and where is it go?
Okay, it's all part of sort of the same story. Right. Okay.
The statement that DOE would no longer be a subject in its actions if another agency has already filed raises the hair on the back of my neck, quite frankly. I know that EPA was here and talked about how they manage the circle part. And I love EPA, I'm sure they're great guys, but surely if they've made a ruling and DOE begins to act, we should have the right to review and question what DOE is going to do under that. At least the way as a layman, I read what is in the popular reports of the implications of the change.
Yeah, and the GAO is asking DOE to tell the country what the waste is, where it is, and timelines for it, and do it in modern, basically, instead of giving kind of a point. That's because those are empirically wrong. It defines some of the uncertainty, because if you don't know the uncertainty associated with waste volumes, you can't design treatment facilities and you can't plan for disposal capacity. And that's the sort of things that Matt has highlighted over the past 6 months or a year.
Well, in some ways, it's even, the example of the waste isolation pilot plant, if people remember, that's the wood facility near Carlsbad, New Mexico, that takes a certain type of waste, transuranic waste, it's called a true waste. DOE ends up almost competing with itself. The sites compete for space, for capacity, at that facility, which seems kind of crazy. That all are gonna, that the Hanford will compete, actually the state of Idaho, by the way, had some incredible agreement 25 years ago, and they get priority, the Idaho National Lab, down at, but anyway, there's an example that the states and the sites end up competing, for capacity at the very limited waste disposal locations across the nation. That doesn't seem like a good way to operate, right? I mean, that's fundamental. That's kind of what the GAO report is.
So clarifying question and then a suggestion. Is this something that the board wants to commission a work group to work on the white paper prior to talking to the GAO or after? And then another point of consideration, the high level waste treatment plant is being designed to meet the waste acceptance criteria for Yucca Mountain, which means it cannot have any reference listed waste components. So it has to go through extensive treatment. So it's not retro waste, it's just high level. But the new facility that might be built to replace Yucca Mountain eventually, who knows, that might be able to accept retro waste, and you spend tens of 20s of billions of dollars building a facility to make this into a waste package that doesn't need to be as clean.
I suggest on your first point, Tom, sorry, was about the GAO. I think we should talk a little bit more with the GAO before maybe getting into a white paper or position paper. Okay. That's what I would think, just to get more information. Sounds reasonable. On the second point, I don't know about how they go about that.
Are you making a recommendation that staff do that, or are you making a recommendation that the board do that?
I'm making the recommendation that we as staff will call the GAO and see if they will come to our next meeting to talk about it.
So on a, related to that, there is a national cleanup workshop scheduled for the second half of September. Have you seen the agenda for this?
It couldn't say
Bristol City.
Yes,
ECA.
yes.
The ECA.
So if you look at this, I think Odo should send somebody to that. It's addressing a lot of these issues, and it's got, many of the DOE management people there. Is Pat going? Yep. Why not? No money?
We're not even doing virtual this year.
There is a
Budget issue.
There is a virtual meeting that we can.
There's a virtual component as well as an in-person.
Because the next week, I think, is a HAB meeting. Committee week.
Okay. So I guess we'll leave it at that Odo will take a look at
it. Yeah, that's an annual meeting that
GAO,
costs the money to get to.
Yeah.
So Jeff, to the first point of administration, DOE leadership, because I know when we had the meeting at Covens, which was the debate, my question was to Brian Vance. And thanks for Steve Marsh about the congressional hearing, because I believe the Secretary of State during his confirmation there was asked about Hanford. So I don't know what Max suggested to the GDKO, but I mean, what's the deal with trying to address concerns with DOE leadership and the new secretary?
Well, I will say that, we don't get, this is your third point, it was just about DOE, policy changes as about next year. Tomorrow we have the opportunity to talk to site leadership. We have the new site manager, Brian Harkins is his name, will be with us. Now he's not the secretary, right? But he's the DOE site manager. I found him to be very open and transparent. And I think ask all the questions we can. We have it tomorrow.
Okay, any other comments before we leave that topic? Okay, we're going to wrap the meeting, but we need to decide the next meeting date and location.
Have to keep it open until 4:45 public comment, right?
Yes.
Is that what we?
Yeah, 4:45 is the public comment. We may have one commenter. I'm unsure at this time.
Let's talk about the next page.
Yeah, let's do the next meeting. So typically we do 3 meetings a year, one here in the Tri-Cities, one virtual, and that's typically in January, February, when the weather's bad. And the other meeting in the October, November timeframe in a location in Oregon. So any comments, Jim? We got room on your ranch?
Absolutely. No, I think we did, the last one was, in Philippines, yes, around at the.
Yeah, with the Dow.
Hmm?
With the Dows, right? No. What was it still?
Yeah. it was in
Yeah.
Philippines.
Oh, yeah, that's right, sorry.
Yeah, out at the casino or
We did
the.
it, yeah.
Which was good.
Yeah.
So, oh, Boardman. Boardman?
Hmm?
We have a Boardman, go to your backyard.
Free beef, right?
Yeah.
Is there a venue over there?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, we have these.
Well, Jim, I know you know Oregon Rural Action, and I know their field director, Saida Sanchez, was gonna ask her about if she's in board with questions about Hanford. One of the things, the first thing she said was, what would be the impact of the community board?
Something to consider is December of this year is when DOE is announcing where the waste is going to be treated and shipped from Canada West. So it might make sense to have a meeting of OHCB in Oregon along the transportation route. Whether that's down the chutes and then, or whether that's, out 84.
I might ask that we, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe the next.
Yeah, it might be a meeting in maybe that's a 2026.
Ordinance, not a bad thing.
Okay. I was gonna propose the first week in November, a little bit later because we're meeting here in August.
Yes.
I would love to host it in Oregon, yeah.
So we can, I'll contact River Lodge where we've been before. And the agency has had meetings there before for that kind of thing. So I'll look at that for the first week of November.
First week of November is the PNNL mediation conference, and there's HAB committee event, so. Just context.
First part of November. There you go.
Oh, there's also a trustee council meeting.
So we're looking now at the second week of November.
Which is Veterans Day. So,
November 13th and 14th, started out there. Veterans Day would be the 11th, and then later that week, potentially.
We can bring turkey.
I mean, no.
So it's a little hard to hear some of the crosstalk, but are we talking about the second week in November, so the week of the 10th?
13th and 14th.
That's a Thursday.
13th
Friday.
and 14th.
A little earlier in the week, by any chance?
All day.
11th is Veterans Day.
What about 12 and 13?
I'll look at that week and I'll see what's available in the venue and I'll come back to that.
Sounds good. Just the next week won't work for me, so if we can keep it sometime in that week, that would be great. Or I can look around for other weeks or something.
And Senator Gorsuch, while you're there, there's nothing going on with the legislature ahead of the short session, correct, that week?
That's right.
Thank you.
That's a matter.
you do have a comment.
Yeah, we'll see if we can have this stuff.
So the next meeting, can we plan more time for, questions? We had no time for questions today. And having 30 minutes for both ecology and EPA to give updates is not enough. I had multiple questions I would have liked to ask. I'm sure other people did too, to clarify things and learn. So if we can have a longer meeting since we haven't met since January, it'd be really nice. And the other thing I wanted to raise is I attended the Emergency Operations Center drill through the Hanford Advisory Board, and it was really informative. And I wanted to bring it up maybe as an opportunity, if Odo is willing to host, you all have drills, multiple times a year. If we could maybe attend, some of us, a small group, just flies on the wall.
I might put you to work.
You can.
As long as it's not an evaluated.
Yeah, we've got an evaluated exercise coming up this year, but the dress rehearsal wouldn't be a problem. That'd be February, and that'd be for Columbia Generating Station. And then April or May will be the next Hanford exercise for 2026. So, we can follow up on that.
Okay, because I found it really informative. I thought maybe other board members would too, just to be able to observe and see how these operations, the drills work for an emergency.
I'll follow up on that because the dress rehearsal in February wouldn't be as big a deal as the March one would, because we're at FEMA there for both of them, but we can follow up on that.
Yeah, I just wanted to raise it early and.
So Jim and Mia, could you give us a little bit of an update on what's going on with the HAP these days?
Yeah, I was just telling Mia and Tom that they'll probably have to give the better part of the update for me, but I certainly have been attending and, you know, with Brian and Matt and Tom and Mia. Susan's here, she can probably give you the best update, frankly, but I am very much looking forward to, is it 13th and 14th? Because you know, 4 years ago, Casey Sixkiller, when he came on at Region 10, he came down and devoted a big part of his day to the HAB, and it was some great discussions. And so I suggested, you know, I don't know, 3 or 4 months back, that we try and get the new head of EPA down here, and also the, correct me if I'm wrong, Susan, but the new head of ecology, who happens to be the same Casey Sixkiller, so that's kind of handy. But his replacement at EPA will be down next week. Yes.
Emma Hogan.
And
Emma Hogan.
yes, so I'm very, very much.
And the agenda came out today.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Sitting in your email.
Yeah. So, really looking forward to that. So, yes, ma'am?
Yeah.
What up?
We had committee meetings. No, I'm gonna blank on, where did we have committee meetings?
June.
June. It's, we had July off, so it feels
Early-
like it's been a long time. But yeah, we have 324 building advice also coming out of the Hanford Advisory Board, which will be presented to the board in August. And if it passes consensus, it will go to the 3 agencies. Yeah, no, there's no translation.
I can give a plug for my committee in September, that's the next month, yeah. We're gonna be having a conversation with DOE and regulators, just sort of informally going around the site, seeing what cleanup is left to do and when it's gonna happen and what sort of the track looks like for the non-tank stuff. They're public meetings, so teams in or show up at the Richland Library. And I think I'm on September, it's a Thursday morning,
This time.
it's September 10th. No, I'm in the afternoon. I'm in the afternoon, 1:30.
Could you give us, on these, capsules, the cesium capsules, what is the status of that project?
So cesium strontium capsules are making progress. They have finished all of their readiness assessments for the storage pad. And the contractors have submitted their readiness assessment to DOE for final approval for the actual transfer process. They found, so they're gonna move these giant concrete casks on basically hovercrafts pallets. They're it's a pallet that rides on a cushion of air. And there was a recent issue with the hovercraft that I think the concrete was a little too rough. So the bag popped a little bit. So they're fixing that and they're smoothing out the concrete. I think that's the issue. That's slight speculation, but they're working forward on that. Everything's still on schedule with the new schedule to be moving capsules by the end of this fiscal year.
September.
Yeah, 18 months to finish once they start.
I think we're going to Weston tomorrow.
Oh, well, we're not going in Weston.
I think go in, at least we'll go to the building and can see the construction at the facility.
Nice segue into the site tour tomorrow. So
I'll cover two things. First, there is an informal dinner tonight, and Tom, the venue that we're going to.
Fable, which is, on the Park Trail, I think. It's about 10 minutes from the hotel. The bus will be driven, if you want to ride.
The van.
The van, it's a small bus. So
Short bus.
the van will be driven, so you don't have to drive. If you want to drive, you can. 7 o'clock is our reservation. That gives us time to check in and keep the press and then head out. We can probably go a little early, but
Do we meet in the lobby at 6:40?
6:40 sounds like a reasonable,
Meet in the lobby at 6:40.
if you want to ride.
Yeah.
And, the menu's pretty eclectic, so we should be able to suit all dietary needs.
Then tomorrow, DOE will be picking us up in the lobby of the hotel at 7:30. So just a reminder, make sure that you address appropriately, make sure that you have your documentation that's required. They will pick us up, we will go to the badging office. And their staff will check everyone in. And then from there, the tour will start. I would expect the tour is gonna conclude probably 2:30. Lunch will be, make sure you've got your lunch ordered. You have time until tomorrow morning to get your lunch ordered if you didn't. They will be picking up the lunch from Jimmy John's. They will be bringing it out to where we're gonna be on the tour, 11:30-ish. Tour is gonna conclude about 2:30. They will bring us back to the hotel. And those that are returning back home or getting in the van, Matt and I will be continuing on to Hermiston and turning the rest of the week to Sage. At the County Fair. So,
So we're checking out at 7:30
yes.
and putting stuff in the van.
Yep. Anybody have any questions regarding tomorrow?
The van's coming back to the.
Yes. Yeah, the lead vehicle there, the bus will be coming in, the bus will be coming back.
I know I have two different appropriate outfits. Do we need to bring a hard hat? I was kind of confused about that. Okay, I was like, I don't know.
The main thing is, no shorts, no tank tops. Make sure you have appropriate footwear, closed-toed shoes, and then just make sure that you've got everything to support documented and testify who you are.
They'll give us PPE if we need it. I don't think we go into WT.
I know.
I don't think we go into treatment line because that's not ready to clear.
If you go into anything general, they will stop and give you hearing protection, eye protection, head, all that. But there'll probably be some parts of the tour, the docent will give information on the bus, and then there might be points in time where we get off the bus and have a manager or someone else at the site talking about that. And I can't remember at what point in time Brian Harkins is joining us, but he has made it a point that he's going to meet with the board.
I think it's meeting us for lunch.
Lunch or early ride or something like that. So. Questions about tomorrow or anything else?
I gotta go back just really quick for next meeting. I know I'm new here, but with that Hamilton County ruling. And, one thing that Justice Kavanaugh had said was the need that it is procedural and not substantial.
Yeah.
For informing decisions, not for blocking projects. Might be good to get an update if any cases have been, I know this board will be updated on that. But if anything comes from that ruling in court, it might be good to get an update on that. That could substantially affect how transportation is going to be treated for us. I mean, that's probably what you guys are looking at. How transportation would be treated for Oregon in regards to that way.
And also just to add to that, the Western Regional Group, this involves the transportation. We are doing our fall meeting is going to be in Carlsbad, and we're doing a website tour. And then Eddie's also in that group with me. So when we go down there, I'm sure with all the court cases and everything else, because we're looking at Western states are involved with the resumption of the true shipments, which is coming in 2028. We've also brought up the fact at the meeting in Vegas we had in May that we've got the Grounded Tank Waste campaign, which is also on the horizon for 2030. So those two things. So all these things plus the court decisions. So we're looking at, and then as you and I have discussed, other planners have discussed about the resumption of the true shipments, the roadshow. So there's gonna be more to follow and more updates that I'll be giving to the board over the next year as we get ready for the resumption of true shipments. So a lot of the transportation piece that's getting ready to take shape over the next.
And I think, you know, just being a board member, but also as an emergency manager, you know, hearing from this is the ability to speed up that NEPA, and we're hearing a 60-day policy. So, not a fear, but a concern of mine would be if you're saying this speed up and all of a sudden it's here and we're certain.
I think from administration's perspective, we're looking, and you're right, NEPA is a procedural thing, so it's, you jump through the hoops so you can't form a substantive decision. And that means that we also need to be looking at whether the basis for the substantive decision on transportation, aside from NEPA process, whether it's arbitrary and capricious based on whether there's a rational basis for the decision that's being made. So those two things are separate. One's process, one is there a rational basis for the ultimate decision, and is it consistent with law? And that's really, we'll be looking at both things from a state's perspective.
That's separate from the true, which is a different process, but that's a good point.
I'm sorry, but we had the lady from ecology being asked directly whether the transportation part of the disposal issue was in her purvey or not. And what I heard her say was that it was not. Did I hear her correctly? From the state of Washington's perspective, that's what I heard from the state of Washington's perspective on their NEPA analysis and whether the NEPA components drove their SEBA process. They only looked at that. They would not look at the tertiary impact. Explaining that fell within the DOE's established procedures. Yes. And so as long as they followed their procedures, Washington was happy. But where does that give us a lever, Doug? Do we not have one? Yeah, there's process, a NEPA process, and then there's whether there's a rational basis for the ultimate decision. So I think I heard we're expecting news on the ultimate decision at the end of this year.
That's when the milestone said they're supposed to decide.
Yeah.
By the end of the calendar year.
Next month or the end of the year, once we see what the ultimate decision is and what is the underpinning for that decision, then we'll do an assessment on the substantive basis for it, as well as whether the NEPA process has been followed under the Supreme Court decision. So historically, what other entities have sued EPA, ecology, or DOE on Hanford? Columbia River, who?
Probably everybody. The state of Oregon. The reason we have the division is because the state of Oregon sued the Department of Energy back in 1982. That's where our funding started. We sued again in 2012 over high level waste determinations. We joined other people in lawsuit. We joined with the recent lawsuit that Washington Department of Ecology filed, and have our own consent decree with the St. Louis Fishing. So
I just want to be super clear before anybody walks out of this room. Nobody's considering suing the state of Washington. Okay? This is a DOE decision. It's a DOE process. Washington has a state process to decide whether their state NEPA is being followed, and that's a separate issue from the Department of Energy.
So the 2012 lawsuit was, I think, led by the NRDC, Yakima Nation, and then Oregon and Hanford Challenge to that. Some other folks joined that one as well.
So if we were looking for a third-party perspective, just to hear their take on 7 counties, for example, who would we talk to?
Jeff Ellis, but he was already glad to talk about that. He's talked about that in my public comment. 15 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have one person that's been waiting online for some time for public comment.
Okay, well, we're, I I think we're there. So we're now going to open the meeting for public comment. And Jerry, would you like to go first?
I don't wanna preempt somebody who's not really waiting online.
Well, yeah, I told Dan that he was first up and then I didn't know you're in the queue, Jerry, but you'll be next.
Okay,
All right,
so Dan Solon.
Dan, can you, go ahead and unmute yourself and join us?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. I appreciate you bringing out the GAO paper. I've been following the whole waste disposal thing since 2012. In fact, it's what got me back into radioactive waste. And they made a series of recommendations. And in the last 4 years, Congress has received two bills, Nuclear Waste Administrative Act, I think is what they call it. If you Google it, you get probably one or both of them. They've never made it out of committee. I think it might be useful to get a staffer from maybe Ron Wyden's office to come down and explain the environment in Congress so the board can get a better sense of what it's going to take to actually move this stuff off site to a safer place that they can't stay on site. And how long they think it may take to do that. You might have to triple stack that waste instead of double stacking it. So anyway, that's my comment. If you consider getting a congressional staffer to give you a background on where that's at in Congress, I think it'd be very useful. Thank you.
Hey, Dan.
Thank you, Dan. You're up.
You want me to summarize?
Why don't you get up in the front of the row?
Okay.
It's easier for the owls to hear you.
Yeah. Is there anyone else in the queue?
No, there is one statement made by a member of public, however, asking for OHCD's positions, but they're not quite on Hanford issues, unfortunately, but I can certainly read the statements.
Okay. You've got 10 minutes.
You shouldn't have said that. No one tells an elected official they have 10 minutes. Jerry Paulette, I'm here as Executive Director of Heart of America Northwest, which, as many of you know, is been working for the cleanup of Hanford since 1987. And we have thousands of members across both states. And some of you know me in that other hat I just referenced as a state legislator. I also, I was planning on offering public comment just about the 324 building with a thank you to the state of Oregon and the board for the very strong position on the what I like to call the trucking of liquid waste decision, not supplement analysis. And so let me start by saying a huge thank you for taking a very clear, consistent, and strong and well thought out position. And thank you, Matt, for the update on the technical end of that I've learned a bunch from sitting here today. I want to add to this that I think the state of Oregon might be interested in having a good conversation with the city of Spokane about the same concerns. The city of Spokane has issued very strong letters, the mayor and the council, and they share every one of the concerns of the state of Oregon about trucking or rail shipment of liquid waste. Many of you know the chair of Heart of America Northwest board is Spokane County Commissioner Amber Waldruff, who's former city council member. And we raised to US DOE and had promises repeatedly from Hanford management that they would speak to the city of Spokane, and that never ever occurred, just like everyone else. For those who don't realize that the first shipments went because you took a strong stand, and the state of Washington loaded like a jellyfish. The first shipments went by truck through downtown Spokane. That's the alternate route. If it doesn't go through Oregon, either truck or rail go right through the center of downtown Spokane, literally through the center, about 200 feet from the front doors of the high school. I think it's very important to look at joining Spokane in terms of that action. Spokane officials are astonished that the state of Oregon has taken a very strong stand about transportation of liquid wastes, and the state of Washington has been absolutely silent. The comments Heart of America Northwest has submitted on the supplement analysis, if you look at them, you will read them and see that they read very similar to a notice of intent to sue. There's a reason for that. And it is not just notice of intent to sue this US DOE, it is also a notice of intent to sue the state of Washington Ecology Department, because the state of Washington State Environmental Policy Act, in answer to Michael's question, includes substantive authority. And the US Supreme Court decision does not change that whatsoever. And the US Supreme Court, for those, I teach environmental law and NEPA environmental impact assessment. The Supreme Court decision does not change the legal analysis of whether or not it's a violation of NEPA either, in terms of failure to consider the direct impacts of transporting these wastes, which are part of the decision. There's no two ways about it. It is not a secondary impact. It is not someone else's jurisdiction. The boundaries of the site are not what matter. It is the impact of the direct action. And so whether it is issuing a RCRA permit or whether it is US DOE's decision of whether or not to move liquid waste or solid waste, the direct impact of those decisions have to be considered in both NEPA and SEPA. And there's very little dispute about that, I think. I think we've been clear. Our view is that if you're not moving liquid, then the SEPA obligation in the state of Washington is that you must mitigate environmental impacts. There's absolutely no doubt that you have both an impact, a potential impact, and you have an available mitigation. Solid. It's pretty straightforward. I'm glad to talk further about that, some of the offline people. 324 building. What I want to start with is that Columbia Riverkeeper and Heart of America Northwest are holding an online workshop at 5:30 tomorrow, 25 hours from now, about 324 and our comments and research that we've been doing. And we have, I think, some very significant new findings about the risks from 324, and I'm thrilled that you are not only commenting, but share the same view that we came to, which is that much more information is needed, and there's a real need for different option, and there are different options. But let's start with the key background and key concerns. State of Oregon has always been concerned about leaving contamination next to the river. Well, the big picture, as Mia said, you've got immediately acute lethal levels of contamination, radiation dose in the soil, 13,000 rem per hour. Sounds like you've done a great job and getting rid of that when you say we're going to clean up to 1 R per hour. 1 R per hour is 8,760 rem per year. That is 8,760,000 millirem of dose per year. CERCLA cleanups at Hanford are generally aimed at not allowing the public to be exposed to more than 3 to 5 millirem per year. 3 to 5 millirem per year equals roughly the allowable circle of cancer risk. And let me compare that again for you. 3 to 5 millirem versus 8,760,000 millirem direct dose in the soil is what they're proposing to leave behind. This is high-level waste, number 2. Our comments and those of the Yakama Nation document that this is high-level waste. It originated out of the high-level waste tanks. There's no doubt that it is high-level waste, and under the Nuclear Waste Policy Act, high-level waste has to be disposed in a deep underground repository, not in the Erdf shallow landfill. The Energy Department responded to the letter of the Yakama Nation about the high-level waste concerns, and in August 23, and said, this is not waste at all. It was a product.
Commercial.
It's a spacious claim, but we were talking about the cesium and strontium capsules. As our comments point out, if they get away with saying this is not high-level waste, literally the source that they're saying is a product was from the cesium and strontium capsules. They will apply the same logic and say it's a precedent if they get away with this. It is vital that they not be allowed to say we can dispose of this contamination as something other than high-level waste, because in their theory, it originated both from tank waste and the cesium and strontium capsules, and they're claiming, and there's a logic string they've got that is not well put together, but it says basically the extraction of the cesium and strontium removed it from being high-level waste. And that means those capsules would not be vitrified, and the same is true for the ion exchange column cesium from Tisker. It's a very dangerous precedent. Third item is, so in terms of options, we think our proposal is that they have to go back and they must go much deeper and remove contamination, not just to 1 rem per hour. And that is their current cost proposal. Environmental analysis is leaving everything behind at 1 rem per hour. We've also documented that there are neutron radiation emitting contaminants in the soil, and they are possibly fissile materials. That becomes very scary, and it adds even more consequence if they're trying to demolish and have to add water to the site to hold down the demolition debris and spread of dust. Because you don't want to add water to fissile material in the soil and to the neutron emitters. Then the DNFSB documented that, and totally left out of all of the Energy Department and EPA presentations and materials, is the fire risk at 324. DOE mismanagement led to the fire suppression system becoming inoperable. The DNFSB review said that you've underestimated the fire risk and radiation dose to the public from fire by 833 times. At the site boundary or at the river shore, that would mean under a reasonably foreseeable fire, you would have a dose that is twice the lethal dose of radiation exposure from the fire. The workers, it's about 8 times the dose. That fire risk is probably, we think, what drove them to say we want to do the decoupled approach, because they want to demolish the building because they can't keep the building active because it is no fire suppression because of their mismanagement of it, whether they allowed the fire suppression system to freeze. But What we can look at is an option that includes building a new actual shielded facility over it. Without shielding, the radiation from that excavation will reach everyone along the river. And it'll be much higher and be just like the N reactor cribs used to be. Thanks. So 5:30 tomorrow, if you'd like to get the Zoom link, and you're not on our email list, just email me. Thank you. No, I didn't. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Gary.
Thanks.
Thing to talk about tomorrow on the bus. Okay, all of our business today has been concluded, so the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Adjourned.
Thank you.